What's up, guys? Hope everybody's doing well. It's time for Knifeology number 3. Traditional, modern, or both? Now, the title is somewhat tongue-in-cheek because, as any good knife enthusiast knows, obviously, the answer is both. So you can go ahead and turn off the video now, and that's the end of it. No, I'm just kidding. No, the answer is clearly both. But the knifeology is deeper than that. The knifeology is, why do we enjoy both sets of knives, or both paradigms of knives, if you will? What is it about a traditional versus a more modern folder that either gets us excited, or we enjoy using one versus the other more, or we prefer to carry one versus the other, where we are our state, local, and federal laws allow for one versus the other, or whatever, all these different factors that come into play when choosing the ever important question of your everyday carry, and what that day, the tasks might be that might be demanded of you. What are you going to carry on you? Because this is one of the most important issues that we could face on a daily basis. So we have to take this stuff seriously. And so, what is it? Do we gravitate towards the traditional way? Do we gravitate towards the more modern tactical way? Or is it both? I mean, can you carry both at the same time, on the same day? These are all questions that perhaps we might not have full and complete answers on, but these are questions that I hope to address this evening, and hopefully just kind of learn in the comments what you all think about this, in terms of like, how do you think about one type of knife versus another? So the best place to begin would be to describe how I kind of look at it, and you can either decide if you completely disagree, if you agree, or if you kind of implement a similar thought process into your daily carry, or if you have something completely different and new which I haven't thought of, that I would definitely be interested to hear what you think. So, as far as I'm concerned, this Knifeology number 3 carries forward this conversation about knives. And if you recall, the last Knifeology, I described kind of my entrance into knives and the history and the story behind what was so nostalgic about the knife universe to me, and kind of what it reminded me of as I was growing up, and the great memories and fond memories I had with my dad, my brother, going camping and stuff like that. And then what it morphed into as I grew older, and I learned about different knife companies and different producers and different ways of making knives. And so it's just this Knifeology is kind of a way of carrying forward that conversation just a little bit more, and kind of describing what it became to me as I got older. Because as I got older, what once was only a Victorinox moved into, let's say a Kershaw with my uncles. And then, so that introduced me to the modern, more tactical folder. But then I loved those types of folding knives, more locking, more heavy duty, all metal construction, frame lock, liner lock, lock back, what have you. Really fell in love with that kind of side of things. And then as I got even more entrenched into the knife universe, and my love of all things pocket knives grew and grew, and fixed blades, I found out about a company called Great Eastern Cutlery. I learned more about Queen and Case, and then I learned about Great Eastern Cutlery, and I began to so appreciate the level of artistry and craftsmanship that goes into something like this or this. And so that awakened a whole new passion for me around, like, and question mark really, about what is it about the knife that I either use on a daily basis, what do I like, etc. So that's what this video is trying to kind of connect with, and kind of not necessarily come to any answers or conclusions, but more or less to contribute to an ongoing conversation about this knife hobby, about what it is that gets us so excited about these tools, these pieces of art, and more or less just these aspects of our lives that are just fun and enjoyable and something that we can share about and fellowship with one another in this cool community that we have going. So for me, I gravitate more, surprise, surprise, to the traditional side. Why is that? And is there room, especially on a daily basis, for something more modern and tactical? Well, those are two different questions. Why do I gravitate more towards the traditional side of things? And I'd like to maybe finish up by addressing the question of, because I do gravitate towards the traditional, more traditional, the tactical, more modern folder became something to me. Not completely, but it did move in a certain direction, which I'll explain in just a moment. But first, let me answer why I gravitate towards the traditional. I think, generally speaking, it has to do with two basic points. The first is, for me, if I need to cut something, because I mean, this is what these are cutting implements. If I have to cut something, chances are it's not going to be a heavy duty task in terms of chopping or sawing or batoning or something like that. Because I mean, if I did have to do something like that, I would be more focused on carrying a fixed blade in that moment. I would hopefully be somewhere in the woods or camping or something like that. And if it was, or hunting, for instance, if I was like field dressing a deer, I would be using preferably a fixed blade hunting knife. So for the heavier duty the task, the more specific the tool in question. That's basically my rule of thumb. Now, in the absence of a specific heavy-duty task, I gravitate towards the more traditional side, mainly because it's usually just a matter of cutting something. It's not, if I don't need something, if I'm not field dressing a deer, if I'm not batoning through a piece of wood, if I'm not trying to make a fire, if I'm not needing to create sparks with a piece of flint or something like that in some more heavy-duty scenario, I enjoy the slower tempo of taking this thing out of my pocket, consciously or subconsciously, as I open the knife, hearing it, closing it, and taking in these small moments of appreciation for the beauty, craftsmanship, cutting performance, that's another thing which I'll say, and a host of other examples as to why, for me, it just makes more sense to use a traditional knife. There's just something about the whole feel and approach to a traditional knife. It evokes something deep to me. Maybe about how my upbringing was with getting into folding knives. Now, would you look at this knife? Let me turn this light on and see if it helps a little bit. Okay, is that too bright? Would you look at this? This knife is probably my favorite. If I had to only have one knife, it might be this knife. Why, you might ask? Well, it's hard to explain in one video. Probably another video will be just on that. But this knife, to me, has everything going for it in every way. It's the size, it's the shape, it's the pattern, it's the bolster, it's the stamp on the bolster, it's the shape of the blade, it's the long pull next to the cut swedge, it's the spear point, it's that perfect spear point, it's the walk and talk. This knife, I think this was made in 2015. This is a GEC 77-2115, so it's a Great Eastern Cutlery Pattern 77 Yankee Barlow. It's a one-bladed knife. I'm sorry. 2 is the main blade, which is a spear point. A 1 is a clip point. So a 2 is a spear point. Then the 1 stands for it's a one-bladed knife, single-bladed, and it was made or produced in 2015. This to me is just the perfect knife. It's big enough to be able to use for pretty much any task I need ever. And yet small enough where I prefer to carry it in a pocket slip, but I can just throw this thing in my pocket and forget it's there. Every time I pull it out, every single time I pull this thing out, I just get a smile. I mean, every single time I look at this thing, I take in the bone, I take in the Barlow, the bolsters, I take in the back spring, I take in the fit and finish of this thing, I take in the patina of that blade. Would you look at that patina? I mean, if this thing fits my hands perfectly, it's just perfect. I don't know what it is. You know what it is? When I pick this knife up, I just feel like I'm home. That's it. That's what this is all about. I feel like I'm home. I mean, this knife is as perfect as the day I bought it. I love this knife so much with a passion. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Whatever just happened there as I explained that knife, that's what it is to me. It's just there's something happens to me when I pick up a traditional slip joint pocket knife. There's just something to it. Now, even with this is a Mazarin sodbuster. I think they call this the Plow. Yeah, Mazarin, made in Italy. This is D2 steel, I think. I don't think it says it, but I'm pretty sure it's D2 steel. And so it's a tool steel. It doesn't patina as readily as 1095, but it is a tool steel. But the thing is pretty sharp. I use this thing in the kitchen a lot. Beautiful Mexican Picote scale covers. Look at that. Look at the grain pattern on that thing. I love that. Really cool. I just got a kick out of this knife. Honestly, I love Picote. I do. I don't have a lot of knives in Picote because for some reason, Mexican Picote wood becomes more played out to me than other woods. I don't know why that is. It's unfair. I don't mean to mistreat the Picote wood or to imply that for some reason I don't like it as much as other woods, because it's certainly not the case. I do like it very much. It might have to be something with the color of the wood. I have no idea. But for some reason, it's not my favorite wood on a pocket knife. But as I said, I still absolutely love it. And to me, look at the pattern, the grain on this knife. Really something nice. I picked this up off of Collector Knives, Mike Latham's website. I think Patty and I talked about this, and Stephen and Justin talked about this on his podcast. This might have been, because of the wood scale, this might have been an SFO of Mike Latham on Collector Knives. These were real popular a couple years back. Just remarkable. Really love it. I love how the handle is nice and round. It's very comfortable with this rounded bottom there to fit perfectly in the side grip as you're cutting steak. It's long enough. The blade is long enough to really feel like you have a steak knife in your hand. You can also use it as a paring knife to peel apples. You can do anything in the kitchen with this thing, really. It's great. This is another example. I will gravitate towards this knife in the kitchen versus, let's say, another great knife. Oh boy, I've been using that knife a lot. I have to clean that off, sorry. Versus something like this, which is honestly, as an apple peeler, this is such a great knife. Spyderco, this is the Delica. Super thin behind the edge. The cutting performance on this guy is just phenomenal. The ergos on the grip is phenomenal. This thing just locks in your hands, really giving you a strong, confident grip for whatever kind of smaller tasks that you have to do. The Delica is the smaller version, I guess, of the Endura. The Endura's got, I don't know, half inch to an inch longer blade, longer handle. But the Delica, to me, is more of like a pocket knife. It's kind of like a cool bridge. It's an older design, one of Spyderco's famous designs, and it's kind of like a cool bridge between a traditional knife versus a modern. I mean, it's very modern, but it still kind of falls into that pocket knife category. It's not like, massive or something like that. So, am I starting to make sense a little bit? For whatever reason, I gravitate towards these knives. Or this knife. It evokes a memory in me. It's a little bit slower paced. It is, I think, as Patty says, as Patty Potato Peelers describes, it's a little bit less competitive. And to me, that's an interesting comment because it's not so. It is competitive amongst collectors. Maybe the more tactical or modern guys are maybe more competitive in the way that they collect and how there's always like some new thing or next best thing that's really interesting, how the technology might have changed or which lock now is hot. Whereas the more traditional minded guys just kind of go at their own pace. There's something more paced out amongst these kinds of knives. And I think that's just more my tempo. Again, it always comes back to the enjoyment factor for me, and that's kind of what it comes down to. I just enjoy these knives so much that if I have to cut something, this is what I'll reach for. Even this is a Victorinox Tinker. What an awesome knife. Cool walk and talk on this. Very nice. Everything you'd need in a little package. Great knife. That's kind of my thing. On the flip side, the tactical modern side, there is definitely, now look at how ridiculous this knife is. This is a cold steel Voyager, I think like the XL series. What a huge knife. This to me, I just get such a kick out of this knife. It is really just aggressive. Definitely more on the tactical side of things. I mean, God forbid anyone ever gets into a situation where they'd have to use a knife in a tactical situation. For me, this is more of just like a novelty. It's really fun. It's really cool. Like if I'm in the woods or hiking or something like that, maybe I'll carry this along with me. I'm going camping or whatever. Just more or less for the fun factor as opposed to like being totally useful. But nonetheless, it's there. And it definitely has a place in my collection. It definitely serves a purpose. It might not be the knife that I reach to for, to use on a daily basis or something like that, but there's just something awesome about it. And I think the enjoyment factor is what's important here. This thing, and to Cold Steel's credit, this knife is one of the sharpest knives in my collection. I don't really use this to cut much. I've stropped it with white compound, which is part of the reason why this thing is a razor blade. Cuts like lightning, this thing. Like lightning. Super thin behind the edge. And then just polished. But this thing will cut, man. I mean, this thing will cut. Also, super strong lock on this thing. It's just great. I mean, there's nothing, I don't think that you can get stronger than the triad lock. Again, it's not as if, do you always need a strong lock on a folding knife? I don't know, maybe. But this was kind of getting back to what I said before about what more modern traditional knives became to me. Because I enjoy cutting with these knives more, and because I carry them more, and just get more of a kick out of them. I enjoy them in pretty much every way more. These types of knives became something to me, and that is they really became like, if I should ever need a knife, a folding knife, to be as close to a fixed blade as possible, I go for strong, overbuilt knives. So generally for me, that's like Cold Steel. Benchmade does a good job. Spyderco does a great job. There are some really like high-end mid-tech knives, which I don't have many of, but they do a great job of just being overbuilt, strong blades that can just do any task. And for all intents and purposes, they can meet the need of what you might need a fixed blade for. Like if you were out hunting and you had to go through bone, or God forbid, you had to baton something very light. Something like that. Or if you just needed a knife where there would be no chance of the thing closing up on you, and you could really just rely on it for whatever you needed. That is what these knives have become to me. Now, but I confess, it's rare that I need a knife to do that for me. So I use these more. But I will carry these knives also. That's the beautiful thing about this kind of a hobby. We can do both. And so that's the other kind of factor here is, my answer is most definitely both, and I carry both on the same day at the same time. So I get the best of both worlds, and in some sense, I guess that's cheating. But that's kind of how I look at it and kind of how I approach answering it. But as I said, I'm not really here to answer the question for everybody. I'm more or less trying to raise the question This is a cool knife. This is another Mazarin. I forget the name of this blade, but this thing's pretty cool. I took the pocket clip off because it kept on coming loose, and it wasn't a great pocket carry anyway because the clip was pretty low. I'm sorry, this was tipped down. That's what it was. It was a tip down carry, and I just didn't like how this thing rode, so I took it off. And I just throw this in my pocket now, more or less, as just like a pocket knife. It's a liner lock. It's definitely a light duty, more modern knife. Again, because of that liner lock, sometimes with liner locks, I find that I can actually, if I grip this the right way, I can actually disengage the lock. Because if I put pressure on this thing just the right way, that will happen and the lock could close. Again, it's not, I don't use this knife for hard tasks anyway, but it's just something that I think about with this knife for some reason. I'm just a little bit more careful when I use it. But beautiful carbon fiber scales, G10 bolsters, really nice. D2 steel, I believe, as well on this thing. Doesn't say, but Mazarin, it does say. Mazarin really does like D2. You could read that. I'm pretty sure D2 is a tool steel. It's interesting how it says stainless. But let me know in the comments. Am I wrong? I thought D2 was a tool steel, higher carbon. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm trying to say. I enjoy these knives more, but I also use these knives. I find if I need to cut something though, I inevitably gravitate towards this kind of thing. That's the minor knifeology discussion. The knife philosophy behind which do you choose, traditional or modern? Which do you choose? That's the question. What do you guys like? Do you only like modern tactical folders? Do you only like traditionals? Do you collect both of them and enjoy both of them equally? Are there days where you're only carrying a traditional, or are there days where you're only carrying a more modern tactical folder? And if you do carry a modern tactical folder, is it that you enjoy cutting with a more modern knife? Is that why? Or does it just bring you joy? I'm assuming that would probably be the answer. It's just because it makes you happy. And if that's the case, I say power to you. Ultimately, this is all about enjoyment, and ultimately, it's whatever you like, whatever you enjoy, and honestly, just whatever gets your heart going, whatever you enjoy collecting, whatever you enjoy learning about, whatever you enjoy following up on, and you know, taking it slow and adding to your collection and saving up and getting another one and adding that one to your collection. I think there's room for both, but I also think it's never a split 50-50. I think even if it's 51%, 49%, guys tend to gravitate towards one or the other. So I just think that's an interesting conversation to have. Anyway, I hope I said just enough to open up the conversation and maybe to confuse some people. But that's just my end of it, or my beginning of it, more or less, I should say. Who knows? Maybe this is all subject to change. Maybe in the future I'll become more of a modern tactical guy. But for the time being, these knives, they just do it for me. They just do it for me. I love all knives, including fixed blades, and I think there's a role for every knife in every collection. But again, it's just one of those things that gets me going. I love the traditionals. So that's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I hear from you as to what you prefer. God bless. Stay safe out there. Enjoy your families. And I will catch you in the next one. See you later.